some of the site headers and attributes and put them in here, um, mainly because as you guys said that, right? So uh, if we need the folks to implement all the site attributes, then that's too much, and most of that not really useful, right? So and not really be used in this project. So therefore, we took a subset. We analyzed, what are the needed um, attribute and objects we need for the underlay stuff that we can reuse them. So therefore, um, obviously, the underlay header is much smaller than what's in the side repo, right? So those are the subset of this attribute and object we think we're going to use in this STMPly project.
Go on, let me stop you 1 second. Do you agree with me that if you don't initialize the underlay, the test will not pass? So
Yes, I
this,
agree with you. For example,
so
you definitely need to set up those ports, right? So yes, I agree with you.
and then how much of Sonic, that is the difficult question, do you need to initialize that underlay?
Okay,
Do you
yeah.
need to run FR4, for example,
No, we
FRR,
don't. We
sorry.
don't. We don't need Sonic at all for this testing purpose, right? So the reason is that um, I think if you look at the new site test framework, right? So there are two parts. One part is that they have a automatic generating the test framework. The site script server, which I think you're going to be discussing on that to how to adapt that to the dash headers. But that server also is automatic generated for the existing site headers. And then the other part of that new framework is there is some base setup allows you to initialize the site and initialize the ports. So basically, you get all those ports available, and you can just use the site script APIs to initialize all those ports and set up some basic stuff. And then basically build that test environment. Therefore, all those setups, the basic underlay stuff can also be done using the site script. Therefore, you don't need Sonic at all.
Yeah,
But do you see, one more question, one. Do you see basically so this test being done by initialize the underlay and then test the overlay without touching the underlay, or in the test it will be a mix of underlay and overlay?
Mm, I think that is um. So there, I think there um. So in some very specific case, there may be some interaction between the underlay and the overlay, but for most of the cases, right? So if we focus in some specific scenarios, I think once you set up those underlay, then you don't really need to change the underlay at all, right? So, but I do believe that you know
I
a, in this in order to test the full SDN scenario, you not only this tight site test framework is not only test the underlay but also not testing the overlay but also test the underlay. For example, we need to make sure the BGP packet is being trapped, right? So we set up the trap. We know, so that's part of the SDN appliance functionalities, right? So as part of the test, you also need to test the uh, underlay as well. But I think maybe some of the underlay test has been covered in the existing uh, the size Swift test framework, so that we top the framework. There are about if I remember correctly, about maybe 1,000 test cases already. A subset of those tests can be um, you know um, maybe directly used for this scenario because it uses those attribute and yeah, as part of the this Dash project for testing, right?
But for example, I assume you may have tests in which you bring up and bring down port to see that the overlay perform correctly.
Or just set up the traps and
Yeah.
test whether we can receive the BGP packets, LLDP packets. Yeah, so those things.
Thanks.
Hey, Gohan, this is Suresh. A question for you. Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. I think it makes sense to have, the changes that are less, or the aspects that are less likely to change, be in the underlay, and probably more likely to change in the overlay. But my question is, do you anticipate the overlay to change often? I mean, the P4 specification that we are using here for the pipeline, is that going to change often?
That's that's a very good question. I think the very reason we're using the P4 is mainly because I think for us, right? So we really want to use a side header for this project, but traditionally, in when we develop the switch, the side for the switch, we didn't really develop a rigorous is P4 program, and I think part of the reason is because I think the switch behavior is more well understood and people have a kind of a common agreement on what the switch pipeline looks like. But however, in P4, we feel like you know this this customer pipeline is not universally known, and we do need precise language to describe what is the packet behavior. Therefore, we use P4. I think as the project grows and as we have more and more more and more use cases, and as Azure grows, I'm sure we'll add more and more functionalities into this P4 program, and therefore there may be a question, if we start adding new functionality into this P4, then how do we kind of keep the side headers evolve while not breaking, the upper applications? There might be, some. How do we, make sure when we're adding those adding those new functions while still keeping backward compatible, making sure the application is happy, right? So there may be some discussion around that. But I think the main purpose for introducing the P4 is to describe the behavior precisely, and so that everybody know what exactly the expectation of this pipeline.
Okay, understood. And just to add on to that, I think, in the switch world, P4 has a lot of significance because, it's mostly stateless. But when it comes to the endpoints where there are more stateful processing involved, maybe there are some new options in the P4 that, I haven't looked at the latest what's available in there. But is that looked through? If do we have all the ways to specify stateful lookups?
Yes, indeed. I think as part of I think one of the key use cases here is to do the TCP connection tracking, and I think in the current model we do introduce some stateful concept in the P4 language to do that TCP connection tracking. So it is defined in the spec. I don't think it's being how do I say that? Like it's our version of that. How to describe that stateful concept in the P4.
So it's not a standard P4 model.
Can I comment on that? I noticed reading the code in the contracting.p4 file, there's some non-P4 constructs in there. They're new inventions. And I happened to run into Marian at the OCP show and asked about that. And he said, yes, but that's true. But we didn't get a chance to finish the conversation. So I would take it as conceptual proposal type constructs. I don't think we should take the whole meeting to talk about this because, we're going to run block out pretty quick.
Just a quick
we
sentence
table-
there. Just a quick line. There is a portable NIC architecture, that is also a sort of consortium part of the P4 line, and there the host side of things are being defined much more in detail and being added to P4. The extents that define the directionality and those kind of things that are not switch specific and mostly host specific are being defined there. Intel is also involved there together with NVIDIA and Marianne, as you mentioned, Chris.
Great. That'll be a fun
My
conversation.
understanding is that this is only an appliance and a switch project, that the NIC part will be dealt by a separate working group under Dash. That is what Christina told me.
Is that true? That doesn't sound logical to me. I think Dash applies for both, right?
Yeah, that's my
but
understanding also.
You need significant extension
I
to deal
agree.
with the NIC. And for the moment, we are not dealing with that extension.
Yeah.
I have an example of something that I'm just curious about. The 20 to make the Silvano's point, the 20 million connections per second, 10 in, 10 out. That seems like an appliance type number as opposed to a SmartNIC number. The connections per second.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely, Renato. I think our point was, so Dash, from the definition of Dash, it applies to both appliance and other endpoints, right? Obviously, the number that you're talking about is more applicable for, or the current definition is more applicable for appliance, as I understand it. But if there is more definitions coming up for other endpoints, would it be the same forum to discuss and adopt it, or something else?
No, I'm just suggesting that it may be the same forum, but we need a focus on a SmartNIC or a NIC or whatever we want to call a DP, whatever. We need to focus on that. So we need, a version of that, packet transforms document that focuses on that, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Because
100%.
We don't have a PCIe interface in that packet document, in the packet transform document. And a SmartNIC need to have a PCIe interface.
Yeah. I want to pause for a minute and just, Christina, maybe if you're taking any notes, there's 3 topics here we've covered in rapid succession that indicate, let's say, a gap in the documentation. And before we get further with 5 more things that we glossed over, maybe we ought to document better the relationship of the side header files and the underlay and overlay, because if we're asking these questions in this meeting, it means we need to somehow improve our documentation. So that's like a to-do for somebody who's a good writer. And then we should probably talk about the P4 program and how there's some, let's say, forward-looking things in the current P4 model. You can't actually compile connection tracking.p4 as it is, right? It says V1 model, but there's statements in there that aren't P4 V1 model. So it's kind of an aspirational program. I think there was one other thing that we went through real quickly. We probably ought to backfill some of the documentation as time allows, because this will be tribal knowledge in a recording somewhere, and we need to put it readable for new people and all of us.
Chris,
and I'm happy to help write stuff too. I like writing.
Chris,
so.
I also think that it will be great if in this picture, the picture that you are sharing,
Yeah.
you split the side header file in 2 groups.
Sure, that's a good idea. Maybe have a different picture that sort of zooms in on that.
Oh, that's fine also.
As I learn more from Intel this afternoon and I'll try to document that better. I want to show you one more diagram.
One quick question, guys. Will there be effort to standardize the SCI APIs that are generated right out of the P4 model here?
I think there's a program that does that, and that's what we're going to learn more about today. But there's actually already software, a P4C backend, that's doing that. So it's standardized because it's machine generated. That's my understanding.
Yeah, that's fine. These are machine generated, but the question I'm asking is, today the underlay APIs go through a SCI community to become basically as a standard SCI APIs that everybody basically has to write their SCI code for. In this particular case, is there going to be an effort to standardize the SCI header APIs or SCI APIs that are generated right out of the P4 program.
Maybe let me chime in. I think there seems lots of interest on this the P4 program. I think what I think the we like the community interest and discuss is we alluded this P4 Pro. Maybe we should work as a community to standardize this P4 program, right? So I think Intel mentioned
for all of
those
SCI?
things.
For all of SCI?
For all of the P4 program, right? So
Yeah.
no for the dash, right? So
Yeah.
the overlay stuff, right? So this P4 program, we as a community need to discuss and agree. So we put this draft version out, right? So we're seeking feedback from the communities, and if people all agree with this, this P4 program, I think then the header can be automatically generated. So it conform to the SCI spec in terms of those metadata and all those things. People don't have to worry about it, right? So we can focus on what is this pipeline and how it should be look like, and then let the program to generate the header.
Yeah, but agreeing on the program means agreeing on the SCI interface. So it is in a way standardizing that interface.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mario, you need to standardize two things. You need to standardize both the P4 model and the tool, because
Right.
The tool is what decides what comes out. If you don't want to standardize the output, you need to standardize the tool.
Yeah. I think the
transformation
tool will be uploaded, and people can also look at the tools to see how these headers are generated, right? So I think my point is that previously we were focusing on the header files and explain what the header file means. Now I think because of this complexity of this overlay pipeline, our intention is that let's focus on the P4 program and standardize the tool so we can automatically generate headers that can be used by the application.
So there has been a bunch of discussion in this meeting, mentioned multiple times, that there is another meeting this afternoon. Is this a private meeting or this is a group meeting? What is it?
It was going to be a casual conversation just between me and Reshma, and then I had invited Chris. Just simply, I didn't want to intrude on anyone's calendar. Reshma, are you opposed to inviting extra people?
Yeah, I think as Christina, as you mentioned, it was going to be a preliminary conversation to see what it is that our expectation is with SciPTF, and to extend it with our engineering team within Intel as well, and the expectations, and to jot down all the requirements as well as what it takes for us to get there. If needed, I was actually thinking that we can have the short conversation first, and then then invite everybody with the information that we have, and then discuss more deeper conversations.
That was kind of a discovery meeting, right? Just
mostly.
Yeah, I mean, if you are willing to report in the next meeting the result, I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah, I mean, and then the next one, if anyone wants to get together, just raise your hand to me somehow, and I'll get everyone together. I didn't mean to exclude anybody. I apologize. I just thought I wouldn't waste anyone's time while we were thinking.
it was sort of a spin-off of my question at OCP, and just one thing led to another, sort of spontaneous.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, I don't mean to be difficult. If you're going to report in the next meeting what you have discussed, that's perfectly fine for me.
Sure.
I wanted to ask, we're scheduled to end at 9:45.
I only do that just to give water and bathroom breaks, and
I actually have a doctor's appointment. I'll have to take off by 10 anyway. I wanted to show one more diagram, because if this isn't enough complexity, I wanted to show this as a different view of showing this is a concept I wanted to propose to people and think about, is how to test the dash sci APIs progressively up through the stack layers. So this is using sci-thrift, where you're just testing the pure data plane. And down here, this is the long game. The long-term goal is testing it through the sonic stack with GNMI, right? And presumably, you should be able to test these with one abstract set of test cases. It's just a different interface, right, to the data plane. One's really tightly coupled to the sci library, and one goes through a lot of stuff, but it really amounts ultimately the same thing's getting configured. I wanted to inject one more thing in the middle, and that is halfway point is going through sci Redis, where you don't. It's still psi-based data model for the configuration, but it's going through into the ASIC DB, and this is a way for developers to test it slightly more complicated than sci-thrift, but not as complicated as all of Sonic. And this is PL Vision's tool that they presented at OCP, both at the Global Summit, and they presented it at a special ad hoc network group meeting. And it looks pretty cool to me, and I just thought I'd bring it to people's attention because they've created a tool that they're proposing to donate to OCP. And the idea is, if you had one set of test cases, you should be able to transform those, and these are abstract, they're not written against any particular northbound or southbound. You should be able to transform those into different configuration APIs and scripts, so you can actually work your way down the stack. And it should be even theoretically possible to write tests that test it through P4 runtime in the behavior model. So I just want people to think about this. You know, it's just it's kind of an academic proposal, but I think it could be practical too, if that's interesting to people. And this is, if we ought to look at this as like nirvana for testing the data plane.
My only concern, you know, which I really don't understand, is are we going to put all the overlay information into Redis? Because, you know, all the overlay information into Redis may create a scalability issue.
I think Gohan should probably respond to that.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that this dash effort was not implying that we are going to put all the overlay information into Redis.
I think what kind of you know, the information that is controlled through the site, right? So I, you know, we did some because I think the you know, one thing I think I want to point out is that you know, the most critical state changes or you know, performance driven state changes like the connection tracking, those things are not explicitly exposed to the site. Therefore, those information is not going to be in the Redis. The one that in the Redis, I think, for example, in the VNet to VNet traffic pattern, what is going to be in the Redis is going to be all those mappings, right? So say to PA mapping, you know, those VNet mappings. So, you know, those things are not, or maybe I need to, you know, help to ask you to clarify when you say, you know, the scalability issue of the Redis, do you mean, you know, the number of objects stored in the Redis or the, you know, the rate of the changes? So what kind of scalability issue you think that will?
I am concerned in both. For sure, Redis will never work for connection tracking. You know, I think we agree on that.
Yeah, so I think I agree. Earlier there was a mention about 20 million connections per second. I don't know if, you know, all those connection information is going to be passed through Redis DB. Is that the same concern you have, Silvano?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that I can explain, right? So, you know, no, I think the side header, if you look at it's a control. It says that you know, basically the site itself is going to maintain the connection tracking. It's not above the SI application, it doesn't need to maintain that connection tracking. Therefore, those connection tracking information is not going to be in the Redis.
So the scale, if we get rid of speed for a minute and just talk about scale, like table entries, does anyone have a gut feel for how many table entries there would be in the mapping and the ASAIL rules and the overlay? I mean, there are hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands.
Millions for sure. Millions,
Now,
because minimum
millions of,
1,000 virtual machine times 1,000 ACL per virtual machine is a million. Minimum, that's minimum. The ACL are static information. So if I understand Gohan want to put them in Redis.
Come again?
For example, the ACL,
Yeah.
are static information,
Yes.
And if you have 1,000 machine with 1,000 ACL per virtual machine, you have a million entry in Redis.
Yes. 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 But I think the changing of those rate is low, right? So as we all said.
Yeah. But you will need to have a memory on the device to support Redis with a million entries, which may be fun. I mean, I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I think we need to be conscious when we decide what goes into Redis and what doesn't go. That some of these cards initially, at least, may have limited memory space and limited processor capability.
Yeah,
I agree. I think so that's why I think we explicitly called out that those connection tracking is not in the Redis, right? So therefore, what's in the Redis is those static mappings, as I said, right? So like say to PM mappings and also those ASLs, right? So that that user has been configuring those things.
Yeah, it sounds to me, and this is really a test working group, but it's also becoming sort of a design working group since we're questioning the architecture. Maybe someone ought to do a quick proof of concept on, loading up Redis with this many items. It's a string-based key value store. There's a lot of inefficient stuff going on in such a hashing and lookups. It's when you scale to a certain size, I don't know how it performs. So maybe someone ought to do a quick sanity check on that. I don't know. But it's kind of outside of the test working group, except if you can't test it, it doesn't work.
Without knowing, you can't test something that we don't even have a POC or anything.
Well, you could even just run Redis on a PC and say, okay, how long does it take to populate this many entries on a fast x86? Mm-hmm. How's it going to work on a slower, smaller ARM? Those are good kind of reality checks. Maybe ought to be done. That's mm-hmm. what I'm hearing. Anyone have any opinions on that?
I completely agree with you. And also I'm concerned by the fact that Redis is a full database memory. The database is in memory. So, if this database take a gig, you will need to have a gig of memory dedicated to the database. There is no disk, there is nothing in Redis.
Right. It's in memory and uses long strings for keys, right? So backing away from that for a minute, it's a good point. Does the idea of testing at the different layers make sense to people as a idea? Is this something people would like to see us talk about more going forward?
Absolutely, I think, but we should start with what you have on the left side and move towards the right side once we have a better clarity on the architecture. I mean, you just touched upon an important point, right? And I think we talked about it earlier. Are we going to have this current version of the Sonic as it is to work on these appliances, or is there a different version of the Sonic which probably doesn't need some of the stuff that we need in the switch world, and how that works with the SDN controller? Sorry, go ahead.
Probably going to be different, and everything's kind of under development as we're going along. So, it's definitely a under development project. So, like you said, take what we have and take in the feedback and move forward. With the smartest guys, that we have in the room here. I think it's awesome.
Christine, I think we have a much better understanding now of what we are even 2 weeks ago. I think we are starting to make real progress.
Yeah,
I think
I agree.
the next big step is the tool, because when I can see what the tool does and how the tool work,
yeah,
then we do the next step.
yeah,
Up to the point I cannot play with the tool.
yeah.
I can speculate, but
Yeah.
that is.
Gohan, would you upload the tool for us, please?
Yeah, I contact the author to upload the tool.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great. And we only have yes, 11 minutes left. And, I do feel you're right. I think we do have more clarity. And, I'm more excited to get past the appliance, of course, and which will have tons of connections per second. But to get to the NIC will be interesting too in the future. So, yeah. But I think we have made progress. And I guess
By the way, I have a final question on this, which is
okay.
a very big question, and Gohan may think to it, or whoever will think to it. The switch in P4 as what is called the PSI, the portable switch architecture, And as Intel mentioned, in the NIC, there will be the portable NIC architecture, the PNA, the PSA and the PNA. Now, what is not clear to me is if this P4 model need to comply with the PSA and the PNA. That is not clear to me. And it's not clear in the sense that I don't even have a preference. I haven't made my mind. And I think the current model is a single ingress pipeline. Everything is in the single ingress pipeline, if I remember.
Yeah. And it says V1 model in the series.
Yeah, but it's not. As
Right.
you were saying, Chris, is not compliant with either right now.
Well,
So
I think just one
I think
file.
we need to understand that.
So
Does
for
anyone-
this one, I think maybe we can I think the intention is to seek for feedback for this draft, right? So therefore, I think we should probably have a meeting and invite the author of this this pipeline to make some introductions, and we have community discussions, right? So
Marian,
Fantastic.
yeah, I wonder, Christina, if you can help to contact Vidya, Marianne, and see I don't know when the time maybe or leverage the next meeting or whatever. So because I think we have the right people in this meeting for all those discussions, right? So looks like we have a lot of expert.
I think I'm
So
meeting
yeah.
with him at 10 today, like in 9 minutes. So I could ask him if he'd be willing to meet. I guess I just need to make sure someone needs to email me the correct question. What I think it is does P4 for the NIC need to comply with, I don't know what you said, BSA, BNI, whatever.
No. I think there may be a lot of various questions. I think the very step is to invite the author to make an introduction, and and then people can understand a little bit, and then discuss all those questions, right? I think those are just some examples. I think I'm sure there are a lot of more
yeah,
questions.
there will be a flood of
So
questions.
Marian's in Israel, so
No, Marian is, I think he is
he
in
local?
US, but but I think you need to contact, I don't know if he has time or not, right? So maybe all the audience here, right? So let's set up time to discuss those models.
Because I could either bring him into this meeting or set up a different one. I'm a big fan of using existing meetings, but yeah, I can certainly coordinate. That's not a problem. No problem.
Christina, if the next meeting they can give us an overview of the model, that will help tremendously.
Model of what? P4?
The P4 model, yeah.
Series
Yeah.
P4 101.
Yeah, okay. Okie dokie. I'll see what I can do. Sure. And also I want you guys to know I did hire, or I put in an offer for a technical writer, and so now I will have someone who can help with the documentation and start converting everything I have to Markdown and start posting it to the repo. He won't start probably for 4 weeks or 2 weeks. I'm sorry, 2 weeks. But there will be more clarity coming in the documentation. These documents were all written by idea guys and engineering guys, and they may not be the clearest. So I do appreciate, I think technically they're sound, but the extra clarity, we can get it in there. So thank you.
Definitely, it will be good to invite Marianne next time. Agree that BMB2 still is works with the V1 model, which is older version, and we are actually there's a lot of thought on how to change that using PSA in the host side, using P4DPDK. That's just sharing some internal information. PNA, however, should be a superset of what is available in PSA. With the added directionality extents and the NIC related items that are also added on top of what is required for switch. So the NICs will, for the most part, adhere to PNA. So this will be a good discussion to have also together with Marianne next week if possible.
Yeah, great. Well, this is opening up a lot of doors, isn't it? A lot of discussion.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Reshma. And like I said, I think I'm talking to him in 5 minutes here. And then, Chris, we didn't get through your whole deck here. So anything?
Oh, this is we covered the gist. I just wanted to show these two diagrams, and we could talk all day about just what these two diagrams.
Okay. Cool.
Hey, Chris, are these diagrams available somewhere? Can you?
The previous one is, I'm going to upload this, do a pull request to put this in the slides folder.
Do you know how to get to the repo?
Yep.
Okay, then it'll be in
I'll do that this afternoon when I get back. I have to have an appointment, but this should be up there later today if Christina approves the pull request.
I'll do it.
And are we going to approve the PR for the?
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Great. Okay. Thanks, you guys. I mean, a lot to talk about today. I actually didn't have anything like a perfect agenda, but you guys are throwing out really good stuff. So thank you.
You're welcome, Christina.
Yeah. I'll take some notes. It's going to take me a couple hours to send them out, but I'll do that and send them out. And I appreciate you all. Appreciate your time. And I will try and get Marian to come talk.
Hey.
Yeah. Thanks, Christina.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.